Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're back. It is Friday, almost on the verge of spring. Amen to that. And here we are, Rap Sheet Podcast, episode number 12. 12 episodes, man. Wow. Awesome. Look, ladies and gentlemen, tonight's show is going to be impactful, entertaining, and very thoughtful, because the person I got coming on is someone that, in my mind, not just saying it because I know him, I truly believe this, is one of the most underrated people in this game. And we're about to introduce him in just a short. Here we go. Turn my volume up. Hopefully you all can hear me. There we go. All right. Hopefully we can get this thing started. There he is.
Hey, man.
There's the guy. All right. As y'all know, I like to do a little backstory on the guest as my introduction since he's here. This is the first time I get to interview someone who I have a personal relationship with. We go way back. Way back to when we played dodgeball in Lynn. There we go. Friend, brother, someone who I've admired, not only lyrically, but just as just a friend. Shoot, I almost spilled my water. This guy right here has been through the trenches as one of the most underrated MCs. And I'm not just saying that because I know him, like, truly underrated, because in this era of hip hop, very few MCs live what they say and say what they live. This is one of those rare exceptions. Obviously, you can visually see that a bigger challenge in this game is he's not an African American. He is a Caucasian guy choosing to do a culture that was started by us, and he's been successful at it. And I don't care what color skin you are, quite honestly. I could care less about that. If you're good, you're good. I ride with you. But your honesty is one of the reasons why I ride with you and was able to go on the road with you. We'll talk about all that. But loving father, loving husband, has traveled the globe preaching the good news about Jesus and just basically speaking hip hop in a way that anyone can understand it. From the 5-year-old on the street to the 47-year-old who's grown up with the culture, he impacts everyone. And I'm glad to have him here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, straight out of Lynn, Massachusetts, the one, the only, Mr. Bobby Bishop. How you doing, my friend? How you doing?
What's going on, Daz? Hey, can you hear me okay? These things have been acting up a little bit.
I hear you okay. Yep. Yeah.
All right, man. Thank you for having me on, man. That was quite an introduction. I appreciate it, bro.
My girlfriend always tells me that I do the long intros too much. I'm like, but I gotta give them the flowers, man. That's who I am. I gotta do it. Always.
Always been.
Well, where do we begin? It's funny, getting the research ready for this, something I didn't know. You were one of the founders of you were one of the founders of the church.
Yeah.
Where we met. I didn't know that.
So it was after that church. So we were at Washington Street. Shortly after you were there, a pastor from a church in Linfield said, "Hey, I'm starting a new church here in Lynn. What do you think?" So we started having some meetings and ended up right after that, we ended up joining up with this other, with Pastor Lang, and started something brand new. And that's we've been at for the past 20 years, and it's grown exponentially. at this point, we're actually the biggest church in Lynn right now, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
So it's been going great. We have a couple of nonprofits under our umbrella. We have a coffee shop. So we have a young adult, a homeless young adult, or um, homeless young adult, or as far as people who are maybe perhaps unsteady on their feet or in a vulnerable situation. We have a nonprofit specifically geared towards them called Haven Project. That's under the same roof, same umbrella. And we have Catalyst is a second nonprofit that we've started that we're building. We're building micro apartments for young adults with housing instability. So that's coming within the next couple of years. It started now, but we got the funding is secured, which is cool. So things have grown, man, and the church is growing a lot. Jess, my wife, is full time at the church as the children's director, which has been great. So yeah, man, things are cool.
That's what's up, man. Keeping it within the family. Hey, Jess, if you're there, how you doing? Another longtime friend of mine. Let me see. So let's go back to the beginning. We're gonna speak hip hop first because that's your voice that you've adapted. And going over your history, just doing my little research and everything. Once you started being this mentor to young people in Lynn, you adapted hip hops a little after that, and I took notes. So if I look down, it's because I'm looking at notes that I wrote. I'm just gonna be honest, man. I take notes, ladies and gentlemen. I do my notes on my guests. I just want y'all to know that. So you embraced hip hop at an early age after you had gotten started, and according to the site that I was looking at, you gravitated towards MCs that spoke a message. So. Um, as a voice that no one has heard at that point, at that time, who were some of the people that you listened to that you were influenced by?
I mean, really, it's one of those things where, as you know, I grew up out in the suburbs, west of Boston. My cousins who were from Dorchester, actually, like same neighborhood you used to live in, up this corner down there on
Yeah,
Pleasant Street. So I was from a young age also spending a lot of time with them, and that was before, as far as all this internet access, it was before any of that. So as far as exposure to other um, cultures and subcultures, it was strictly through face to face experience. So
right.
on weekends, I was jumping on the train and going and spending a lot of time in Boston with them. And so I basically did, especially David, my cousin. Anything that he told me to do, I basically did. So I was the only kid in my high school with the triple fat goose and Adidas forums. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what was going on in Dorchester, right? So
Right.
the kids out my way had no idea what was going on, but I knew. So um, and that was kind of how things jumped off. So he would bring mixtapes out our way, or kind of give me the okay and the thumbs up on, okay, this is what's hot. This is what you don't want to tussle with. Um,
Right.
And I mean, the first tape that really kind of got me hooked was The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. Uh, just kind of blew my mind as far as like, well, what is this? What are we listening to? And from
Yeah.
there, I remember he brought Big Daddy Kane, Heavy D and the Boys, um, Chiali, Special Ed, and then I really got into like KRS and Tretch and
Hmm.
lyricists like that, Native Tongues. Those were all I started kind of exploring on my own, trial and error, figuring out
Yeah.
what I was into. Third base. When third base came out, I was like, oh, this is interesting. So all different. Mostly New York guys. And I
Yeah.
always followed the Boston guys too. So when you remember, like, Concrete Click came out, I was all about them. Um, so I always followed Edo and
Hmm.
everybody coming up on the Boston scene, even though Edo was the first kind of like international name that I was like,
Yeah.
wow, this is a local guy.
Hmm.
So was really all about that Roxbury record. And like I said, it was kind of like this kid out in the suburbs mowing the lawn, listening to stuff that really was not my immediate surrounding in my Monday to Friday. But then once Saturday hit, that's where I was. So
Right.
it's kind of a deliberate move to just kind of learn and be a part of something that I didn't necessarily understand. It was absolutely an adoption of culture, but I have definitely have new perspective on that as I've gotten older, as far as or an appreciation for the grace that was always extended to me by guys like you who um, came up in a different environment than I did, but still always were very welcoming. And
Yeah,
I think my
absolutely.
perspective on it now is that I hope, at least, I hope that I always honored the culture that wasn't intrinsically mine, and as a result, you reciprocated that love. You know what I'm saying? So I definitely have a new appreciation for that.
It's funny you mentioned, you just say that to me. It's like I didn't start the culture and everything. And again, I don't care what your skin color is, where you came from. If I can relate to your lyrics, I'm a fan. And
Yeah,
I related to your lyrics. And yeah, and for me, listening to you, it also gave me a chance to learn how you was brought up, being that we came from
sure.
two different backgrounds. So that
Mhm.
was another bonus that I got to learn how your family and how you came up and how you did things. And I'm sure you've gotten flack from kids of color, like, why are you trying to infiltrate our culture and all this other stuff? You
Yeah,
clearly wasn't trying to be something that you wasn't. You just found your voice. This is how you chose to use it. And if you were going to ride with it, you were going to ride with it. If you didn't, you didn't. So no apologies at all. You should never have apologies for something
yeah.
that you truly love doing that you know is inside your heart. Because bigger challenges were going to follow this, and we will get into that as we move forward with this. If you're just now tuning in, we got Bobby Bishop on the line, Lynn legend,
Indeed.
MC legend, and yeah, and I yes, and accept the legend because I'm gonna call you a legend. Deal with it. So
Good
you
luck.
have no.
Good.
Uh, you started now the first group you were a part of a group first. It was a duo. Um, and I
Yeah.
actually tried looking it up to see if I could listen to those records again because I used to have this and don't have it anymore.
I
But
have some
how did
tapes in the basement, I'm sure.
you still have it? I love the
I have
album
some
cover. It
tapes.
was so cool. Before you talk about this,
Yeah.
today's generation, when they make the mixtape covers and everything, way more advanced technology than how it was when we were coming up as MCs. This was the most generic album cover I think everything just had the group name and a picture.
Yeah.
No
Yeah.
background graphics, no nothing. Real simple and plain. And it was a cassette cover. Y'all don't know about the cassette covers, but we'll talk about that as we go along. But
We
Found
made it on a
Nation.
copy machine. You know, we cut everything out. We put it on there. We put it on a photocopy machine. That's how we did it, one at a time.
Hey, whatever works. Back in the 90s, that's how it was. Um, how did Foundation get started? And Lydia was the sister's name, correct?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
man. It kind of started. It actually started with my guy Eric. Um, so Eric Smith, my freshman year of college, we just I don't even remember how we met, but somehow we crossed paths, and I realized that he had a bunch of equipment. It was just he's just random. He's just a suburban kid like me, and he just like making beats. It turned out I didn't even know that when I first met him. He was like, "Hey, I got a bunch of drum machines and samplers. Like, check out what I'm working on." And he's talented. So we just started messing around in like the laundry room in the dorm, and
Nice.
just started working on stuff. Put up like set up like a little SM58 and just recorded demos and stuff. And as things kind of progressed, I was friends with Lydia, and she jumped in for a couple of songs, and we just decided to kind of make it something official. And since it
Hmm.
wasn't like this big campus, the opportunity kind of bring a rap show and start doing rap shows on that campus, it was easy to accomplish, even as far as like student government having a budget to put something on. So like the
Nice.
first, like we started doing like just coffee shop. There's a little coffee shop on the campus, so we at Gordon. So we were doing stuff there, and people started coming out for that, which was great. So then I was like, you know what? Let's see what the budget's like. And there was a GCSA had a budget. The student organization had a budget. So I said, hey, let me bring somebody in, and let's do something bigger. So I found out who Grit's manager was, and called this guy Dirk up and said, hey, when you guys come, what's the price? The price was reasonable. So Grits came out, So we just put on a show with us, New Breed and Grits, and that was kind of like a jump off for us, which is a trip because people don't often get that opportunity. And that was like one of our first shows we ever did together was
Yeah.
security. I mean, if you guys don't know who Grits are, if you're on TikTok, you do because that song "Ooh Ah" is still making them money all these years
Yeah.
later. It's wild. Yeah.
Yeah. What was I gonna say about Grits? I think the song "They All Fall Down" featured on a few movie soundtracks as well, if memory serves me correct.
I
But
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
"Ooh was huge. It was
well,
in one of the two Fast and
like
Furious
everyone knows
movies.
that song.
Yeah,
It's everywhere.
yeah,
It has been viral forever, and it always makes a comeback. It's wild. I'm like, these guys they've lived off of that song. It's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. So we got to hang out with them early on. Them and Verbs. Verbs came out too. We got to hang out with them early on, and it was just something fun. Lydia ended up kind of going. She went a different direction shortly thereafter. So I
Hmm.
just kind of kept things going solo after that.
Right, right. If memory serves me correct, that same night there was another group that performed. A bunch of rowdy SOS kids that performed that night.
They certainly did. They certainly did. That's
Oh
what I was actually.
man,
I was actually going next with that, man, which was
right.
cool. You and Mav.
Because
So it was definitely. So remind me, it was you and Mav. Did Rockland come up on for that one too?
it was Césaire, Rockland, Mav, and myself.
Yeah, man. I mean, how wild is that? So that was the next thing I
Yeah,
wanted to bring up. Like the whole Boston squad came up for that too, which was just so amazing, man. Um,
yeah,
and it was really like again one of those situations where what was really cool about it was as soon as I reached out to you guys and to Chris and to Macho and was like, bring the Boston people, you know, everybody jumped in the car and came, and it
yeah,
was sort of my first. It was my very first experience putting together like a bigger event. I had no idea what I was doing, um, but it ended up being like a really dope show.
yeah.
Everyone got up and did their thing. Form DJ for Grits, and some of us we didn't even have a DJ. We were just like push and play, you know. But the
Yeah.
crowd was hyped. It was just a fun. It was a fun night, very memorable night, man.
It really was a fun night, and it gave me a chance to, for me, what year was that? Was that 97? Was
96,
that
96.
96? Okay. So for me, I'm just getting introduced to gospel rap, but let me say it differently. I'm getting used to gospel hip hop because when I first started knowing about gospel rap, I was at New Covenant at the time. Shout out
Yeah,
to Pastor Bishop Thompson and Sister T. My first introductions was like A1 Swift and
all
Dynamite,
right.
Dynamic Twins, and
Dynamic
gospel.
Twins. Yep.
And no disrespect to them. I mean, they were great for what they did. But when I heard about Cross Movement and then
Sure.
Tunnel Rats and then Grits, I'm like, okay, I love gospel gangsters. They bring the mainstream, and that's great. But then we got the lyricism over on this side, and cross movement, and bringing it a lot edgier and everything. I was like, I want to gravitate towards that because growing up, I was a Poor Righteous Teachers fan, a BDP fan, a Public Enemy fan,
Right.
and as a Christian, I wanted hip hop that reflected my love for the hip hop that I already was listening to. So cross movement fit right in, and then grits fit right in. So for me, I'm at that show because you already got New Breed, ladies and gentlemen, and this is not a knock against you because I know you're the guest right now, but ladies and gentlemen, New Breed, Lord,
Yeah.
if you have never seen that, I literally call this group the best group in Boston, period, hands
They were.
down. But
Yeah, they were.
so with them, with you, with Grits, Know the Verbs, perfect show. I'm glad I attended, and I was this the first time. Now we kind of evolved our relationship after that, and so, but that show was wonderful. So you and Lydia go separate ways. She wanted to do something else. So you prior to this, you didn't do solo stuff as of yet. You were just all foundation, this, that, and the third. So now you have this new door to open as a soloist.
Yep.
What were the challenges in the beginning for you embarking on a solo venture at the time when you did it?
I mean, again, the as far as like I said in hindsight, as far as kind of like trying to crack the door. It's funny. So you know Mike McPherson's kind of like the glue that holds the Boston guys together for the past
Yeah.
15 years, especially. Um, he kind of always refers to me more or less as like OG, and kind of one of the ones who really jumped things off in Boston. And we have talked about that. I'm like, it was definitely it was actually SOS and New Breed, right? And I came in right kind of like alongside them, but they were the ones who showed me love. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and this is kind of maybe not the answer you would expect as far as challenges go.
Mm-hmm.
It actually wasn't that challenging, and the reason it wasn't as challenging as you might think is because one, you guys embraced me from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
No one was ever resistant to my presence. We were down on Blue Hill in Mattapan outside New Cove. Rockland and I saw Rockland a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about how like, man, we used to, I mean, we would go for the services and the concerts there, but it was the ciphers afterwards while we were there, right?
Yeah.
And no one ever once suggested I shouldn't be there. Everyone you guys showed me so much love, right? So as
Mm-hmm.
far as the perception that might have been an obstacle, like, hey, you don't belong in this, no one ever even suggested that. You guys were like,
Right.
oh, cool, you're putting in work, you're putting in effort, you're showing love to us, let's go. Um,
Yeah.
which is humbling. But the part that was, and I've talked to you about this a little bit. I think last time we had a very long conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The the perspective I have more as a social activist and an adjunct professor at Salem State. Uh, I teach a human diversity, dynamics of privilege and oppression class, and so I've thought a lot about my own perceived appropriation and where the lines of appropriation are. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, one thing that I definitely the narrative I don't like um, with MCs who come in acting like being white is somehow some kind of an obstacle. I push back against that very hard because it's not. If anything, I was talking to Mike about this recently and Ernest at Applejack. Shout out to Applejack, I see he's on here. Um,
Yeah.
that's my best friend. He we've talked about this extensively. In that, out of like I said, the guys who are from this region, um, you know, there were years where I was doing 200 concerts a year, and I did. I signed a. We'll get into this. I'm confident, but after I did a bunch of indie work, you know, as far as the pathway to Sony and Warner and Universal and things, like I got to go down those roads. I was kind of in the minor leagues. I guess we'll talk about that, but I was the one who got to go down that path ultimately. Those opportunities were granted to me. And in hindsight, a lot of that had everything to do with the fact that there were a lot of people bringing me in because it was like a venue that maybe it was, especially youth groups and youth conventions. So like, well, it's hip hop, which is cool, but I'm confident the implicit biases were also like, well, we don't want to bring something too edgy, but we could bring this dude, and
Yeah.
that was the pathway I was very it was very easy for me to navigate, not realizing what was even happening. But like I said, in hindsight, like, oh wow, I had an easier ride. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't because I was better than anybody. There were a lot of reasons why I had an easier ride because there was already an infrastructure there that was ready and willing to bring me in. Um, I mean, obviously, talent and diligence and all those things, you can't just, that stuff doesn't fall into your lap. You got to put out a good product. But but as far as me being, is there being any reservations about putting me on the stage? There weren't any, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my perspective on it now, all these
Yeah.
years later. You know what I'm saying? So
That actually will lead to the next question I wanted to ask. You again doing my research, I wrote down some stuff that you had quoted, and you said you adopted hip hop as a tool of outreach and expression with the desire to use music to add value to others, while penning words that challenge the listener and reflect honesty, struggles, and victories. That's powerful first and foremost because there's not too many MCs that are willing to do that and actually do it consistently like you have. Um,
thank you.
I'm trying to ask questions without offending people watching right now. I like to just be raw, but I like to be professional And
You know I will be offended. You can fire away
okay.
with me. We're boys.
No,
Yeah.
well,
So
I know I won't offend you, but there's certain
yeah.
questions that I may ask that may rub viewers the wrong way. But do you feel, and I know you don't say this personally because you never have as long as I've known you, but do you feel that other people may have said, oh, he just got in because of white privilege?
Sure.
Oh,
Sure.
he just got in because he
It
may
was
have a certain amount of money. He just got in
sure.
because he's in the market. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that, and why?
I so I do agree with that. Not and again, but it was I think at the time it wasn't a conscious thought.
Right.
Um, and even as far as the first label that I signed with, for at least at the beginning, I was their only white artist, but even that wasn't necessarily like, oh, he's the white guy. The owners of the label were white, right? The owners of the label had he had produced they owned Goatee Records. They kind of branched off and did their own thing, so they had produced Grits and all these guys. Um, so as far as kind of looking around the circle on who was who and who was getting what opportunity, etc. Um,
Hmm.
I don't think it was looked at by the other artists as though Bobby's getting different opportunities because of his background and because he's white, etc. Especially at a time where um, white artists were hot. I mean, Eminem was prime at that point in time,
Yeah.
so it wasn't weird for a lot of people. They were looking for it, in fact. But I never felt any opposition or abrasion at
Hmm.
all from other artists. And but again, I think I don't take the credit for that. That was because of the grace. I believe it's the grace that was being extended to me, but also because relationships are important to me. So
Right.
if I was trying to cultivate relationships with people and they knew me personally, um, hopefully what they realize, I don't want to speak for Ernest here, for Apple, but he's spoken into this in my life quite a bit. We've had this convo as far as the idea that, like, hey, if you're honest and you're real and you're honoring the culture and you're willing to be transparent and have these conversations, then there isn't going to be pushback as far
Hmm.
as appropriation and co-opt because you're part of the family. Um,
Yeah.
Now there are artists that I didn't always do that perfectly because not everything was conscious. So I'm confident I did get opportunities that maybe wouldn't have been given to others. I can't speak definitively on that for every situation, but there was a season where I did realize that there was a theme going on where I was doing these public schools tours across
Hmm.
the country, and there was a trend. You know, like I was looking around, like, oh, these schools are mostly white, and
Yeah.
that was interesting. You know, so things like that at the time wasn't totally I wasn't totally computing like what was going on as far as that
Hmm.
went, but like I said, I've done a lot of reflection recently. It's like, oh wow, I'm wondering if subconsciously they put me on, not really thinking about that, but also perhaps thinking about that. As far as what was going to resonate with their crowd, who knows? But as far as from fellow artists, I can honestly say I've never had one person suggest that I shouldn't be there or that I was getting opportunities that should have been theirs. At least that wasn't said to me.
Right.
Now, but was that a possibility? Of course. You know,
Yeah.
I would say that there's certainly a possibility that that there was resentment for some of us who kind of were because there was a season where there was a whole bunch of white dudes who were coming in all at once.
Yeah.
Um, between KJ and Marzell and me and like a bunch of guys, we all kind of dropped at the same time, and I can
Yeah.
imagine that there could have been some resentment. They're like, hey, especially with with a youth group audience when
Hmm.
Ruben was there, like with a youth group audience, I'm pretty sure that that was a narrative that maybe wasn't brought to me at the time, but if it
Hmm.
was there, it was valid. And I would validate anyone who would have that conversation now. Like, hey, you guys
Yeah.
saw it easy. There was an easy path to youth groups, and there were guys taking those opportunities. And what was that about? That's
I,
been my thought on it recently. But artist to artist, I have always got so much love. It's amazing. It's humbling. It's so humbling that everyone just showed me love always. Um,
but I think at the end of the day as well is like you got to realize who y'all were doing the music for. It wasn't for money. It wasn't for attracting crowds. It wasn't for building a legacy. Y'all were doing it for the Most High, which is, I mean, Jesus welcomed everybody, from tax collectors to prostitutes to Romans to the Sanhedrin. Like he, everybody was welcome. So in the same sense as you is like, look, you know, or you, KJ, Mars Ill, John Rubin, and so many others who I all love in respective ways. I mean, so many records from all of them I could just name right now. But it really, at the end of the day, it's like, who are we doing this for? We're not doing it. It's not a white or black thing. It's not a Puerto Rican thing. It's not a Haitian thing. It's a God thing. And we just wanted to drive home the message that God is here and God sends out whoever he wants to use. So if he spoke to Bobby one night in Lynn and said, look, you're going to go out and you're going to do this and do this and do this for the betterment of my mission, my people, I call you. Once you're called, you're called. So for me,
I
I
will
didn't
say
have it.
this
Huh?
though. So some of the earlier events are my best memories though, because it
Oh,
started. I mean, it started in a way, and there was a season where this dynamic shifted a bit, kind of what I was alluding to as far as the public schools tours. But before that, most of what was going on, and a lot of the stuff that you were joining me on, we're going to New York.
yeah.
And those are my absolute best memories. Like the fact that we were being brought in to do shows in the Bronx was crazy to me. Like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? I'm from suburban Boston, and you want me to come in and to you want me to come to the South Bronx and be the headliner? What on earth do you mean? And but again, it was because they just were like, yeah, let's go. Um,
Yeah.
but I think it is to your point though that I believe that people saw that the intent was hopefully pure, and that as far as if you're breaking some barriers there regarding background, that wasn't the concern. Because the feeling was this is going to resonate with our crowd, so come and do it, and it inevitably did.
Yeah.
But those are my absolute favorite shows we ever did. Well, the New York stuff was the very best season.
Yeah, those were some fun times. Shout out to
Yeah,
Combustible
man.
the Poet as well.
Combust,
Great
yeah,
guy all
man.
around, man. Um, that was that guy right there, man. So let's talk the first album. Community's Call, 2004.
So
Where you?
actually, it dropped in 03. Yeah,
Okay.
03 was when I finished it up, and finally got the finances together to print it up. So
Did you now artists? You know, this is just a thing with artists anywhere. Everyone has their own certain writing style. Do you write ahead of time? It's in your head and you just quickly write about it, or do you wait to have the beat and then you do it on the spot, or you need time to perfect it? How is Bobby Bishop's structure of putting a record together?
I was never Jay Z in that regard. I couldn't just show up and spontaneously do something. I had to plan it out. I'm neurodivergent in that way. My ADHD is alive and well. I was never the type, or have never been the type, and you probably have memories of this because I remember being in the parking lot on Washington Street in Lynn, and one night we spontaneously decided it was time to battle, and you raked me over. I mean, you destroyed me, and I thought that, oh yeah, I rap, so I'll go with it, and I had no idea, and I learned in that moment, oh, my brain doesn't do this. I didn't actually learn it though. I pressed in and kept trying as far as the
Mhm.
spontaneity of it all. And I learned eventually after, I mean, ultimately I spontaneously entered the Super Bowl battle for some reason. It went up against Jake the Snake and these guys. And I think Rhymefest ended up winning that thing. But I was like, why am I on this stage? I have no business being here. And I did horrible. Right? I think G Spin stopped calling me back after that because he was like, "Oh yeah, I put you on the spot, thinking that you were about to get up here and do this thing, and apparently you can't do it." Um,
Yeah.
my brain has never been able to do that well. I have to write. I have to sit down and write and rewrite it and match my
Yeah.
vowels. And I'm obnoxious about it because I take too long. And but it took me, I had to learn it the hard way. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, it's always a writing process for me. It's never quick, write this down, now record it. I'm never happy with that. I usually I record it and learn it and then figure out which vowels and syllables weren't matching the way I like them to, and I rewrite it and then I record it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. But there are guys
Um,
that's not their process at all. They show up and they just go in the studio on the spot and they're brilliant, you know. So
right. What was I going to ask next? Okay, so your first solo album, you're presenting it to the world. What was the overall message of this album that you want to present to the masses that were about to hear this?
the first one, the community
Yeah.
assault record,
Mm-hmm.
it was a jump off. I just done demos before that, and then over a period of a few years was just kind of trying to save up money to get in the studio, little by little, calling in favors. Yeah, I had who produced on that? A lot of people. Johnny Ferragamo produced a lot of it. Deftone in Chicago produced a bunch of it because he kind of put it out under his imprint. Um, so it was, and I think I worked on some of the production myself too. It really came down to uh, at that time I wasn't aware of the fact that I had my own story. I'm somewhat under the impression that I was there to just tell other stories. So most of the
Mm-hmm.
content on that record was influenced by the kids in the youth group that you do in Washington Street.
Yeah.
Because there were a lot of stories in that bunch, right? There's a lot of stuff going on there, and they willingly shared it and kind of joined that journey with me as far as like, hey, let's put something together.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot longer than I anticipated it would. Um, had a lot of help. Yo, you jumped on the headbound track. Combust was on there. Mancho was on there. Um,
You had Drastic on there.
yeah, Drastic was on there.
Oh,
From Remnant. Yeah, I mean, the fact that I had the guest artists that I have is kind of wild looking back. I'm like, man, I had
yeah.
some heavy hitters on that record.
Yeah,
Um,
that was very dope. Very dope.
what was
I
cool about
never
that
told you.
project was, oh, what?
No. Go ahead. I'll say what I'm gonna say after. Finish up. Go ahead.
So no, what was really cool about that project was we had a donor. There was a donor who worked it out through our church where she donated a large sum of money to our church, and for this for the purpose of pressing up more records than we intended to. So yeah, you know, I would have done maybe 500 or 1,000 stuff from there, and they were like, this person was like, do five
Hmm.
and give them away. I'm about to pay for all of them. So somebody paid for the whole batch. So with Lynn, we were just handing those out because we had so many. And that's kind of why still to this day I have people approach me who are like, hey, I don't know if you remember me. You know, these are people who are 40 years old now. Like, hey, at this event or that event, you handed me this project. I still pull it out sometimes. It's because and we gave out thousands of those, which was really cool. It was very generous.
Yeah, that was good to see. You know, I like having hard copies of stuff. So to see that and being able to
Me
give
too.
it out to
Me
people
too.
everywhere that we went, it was a really cool thing. I never shared this story with you, so I'm going to share it now because it all wraps around the record we did. I
Sure.
still listen to it to this day, and I'm like, man, is that really? Because my voice was
Well,
so different then than it is now.
where did
But
we
the verse,
record? Did we record that up in Middleton at Kenny's studio? At that little studio up on the North Shore?
um, oh, I don't remember where we
I think
recorded
so.
it. I know
Yeah,
that
I think you
I
came
didn't
up
have
to
a
mix some
car back.
oldies.
I didn't have a car. I just took the train everywhere. I think you picked me up and brought me there, and then brought me back. Um,
I think I picked you up in Lynn. I think you got to Lynn and
yeah,
we drove up to Middleton and recorded a Kenny spot. So yeah, man.
right. I do believe. Um, my verse that I wrote, I was trying to figure out. Okay, Bobby gave me the format to what the song was going to be about. How can I fit 10 bars and get my point across as it relates to the record? So the first few lines were Deftone supplies a hot track. Bobby laid the format. Call was made to me that gets to appear. But after those lines, I was like, all right, let me get deep. And I really wanted to bridge the gap between black MCs and white MCs and realize why we're here on this same page, because we're not doing it to promote my culture, his love for hip hop, my love. This is all about the kingdom of God at the end of the day. And so when I said consciously conforming to the culture known as concepts, breaking down the walls of this white and black nonsense, that line is because I got tired of hearing people saying to me, oh, Beastie Boys are horrible. What is Third Base doing? Why are all these white boys taking our culture? I'm like, well, why do you think they're taking it? Don't you think they're elevating it? This is a world-renowned culture that we're in. Who cares who did it? But then at the same time, and I never shared this with you, a lot of people were mad at, I mean, a lot of people were happy that MC Serch brought Nas into the game and gave him the career that he had. I'm like, you realize the same guy that you're bigging up is the same guy you just tore down when he was an actual artist. Where's the balance?
So I'm gonna play devil's advocate on that because I'm such a Nas fan, and I'm a Serch fan too. But I feel like no matter what, Nas was breaking through. It didn't matter.
Oh,
Serch happened to be the guy, but Nas was breaking through. You know.
Absolutely.
But I hear you.
But I needed to really show, because you were the type of MC that lived what you said what you mean, especially on that particular record. I'm like, man, if I do this, I gotta do this right. Because if we do this live, people need to see the camaraderie between Bobby and myself, because it will mean so much more. I just didn't want to write that and not mean it. So I defied the lies just to make my paper rise. I'll never nod my head if the truth is not applied.
You remember your verse?
I do remember, yeah. The devil hates this, but
that's in on the song. I mean,
stop your blasphemy. Your Moses plans is straight useless.
That's crazy.
I felt good leaving the studio after saying that. I was like, man, this is gonna hit a home run, not only for the record, but for me to write because I'm not a good writer. I suck at writing. I'm not afraid to
tell you. That's the best verse on that song. That's one of the best verses on that whole project.
Stop. No, I am a horrible writer. Everyone listening, for those that know my MC days, I am a horrible writer. But if you ask me to come off of this, Bobby will be sleeping and I'll still be rapping. I wanted to thank.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I wanted to thank you for giving me that opportunity to do something that was not in my comfort zone. But I got to work alongside a person who was already a friend and a family member already. You and Jess have opened your doors to me so many times. So for me, it was a privilege and an honor, and I wanted to thank you. And I got to go on the road. So I didn't have an album out, and I'm going on the road, performing with Camp Quest and Barry Mary and Cross Movement and John Rubin and DJ Manuel and all these great. I'm like, I don't even have an album out, and I'm on the road because of this guy putting his trust in me.
But thank you. Thank you. I mean, on the other side of it, understand, and again, it's just me being transparent. Hey, this was shout out who's on here, man. Apple's still on here. My man Craig is on here. The homie Haley's on here. Shelly, there's some people on here. It's cool. Oh, Hallie's on here. Some people, man. So here's the thing about that. Truth of the matter was, there's maybe some irony to this statement, but even though you're looking at it like, wow, what an opportunity, I wasn't comfortable enough taking that stage myself at that time, right? I needed backup. And so the fact that you were willing to get on the stage and learn my songs and back me up as a more or less no-name artist at the time is very humbling. The fact that not just you, I've had 10 guys who've done that over the years who said, yeah, let me learn every song and go hit the road with you. That's crazy. Like thinking about that, that's crazy. So yeah, it absolutely goes both ways. You're saying, man, you helped make the stage fun. You made it a fun show.
Yeah, it was definitely a fun show. But you made it a testament to the type of person that you are. Makes it easy for someone like me to be like, oh, I'm with it. Let's do it. And I don't care about money. I don't want to make no money. That's not the purpose. It was just
And we were
fun.
making a lot anyway, so
Yeah, we really
for,
weren't. We
for
really
breaking
we
even, we were lucky, you know.
yeah we really weren't. It was all about the experiences and just adding it to our respective resumes. But I just wanted to say that to you face to face, man to man. Thank you for giving me that chance. I'm giving me that
No worries, me.
opportunity. And if it ever happened again, even if it does, I'm not sure where you are now musically. I know you just dropped some new stuff last year, which is, man. Let me I shared with Akela your Love Endures track like a couple of hours ago because it had
Okay.
the lyrics painted and the way the lyrics presented on the video on YouTube was amazing. I'm like, listen to this, give me your thoughts. And I was just listening to it. I play it a lot, but I was just listening to it. Um, and I was like, man, he's telling a story because under in hip hop, ladies and gentlemen, not every word has to rhyme, but you can tell a story poetically and still get your point across. And that record is probably one of your best records to date. You have a lot of them
Thank
that
you.
I love. That is one of the ones that really honed in on me. So, with that being
Thank you.
said, the question I want to ask now is out of all the records you've done, um, and I probably already know the answer to this, but I want to hear you say it anyway. Which one is your favorite and why?
I mean, I guess it's easy to say because it's more of where I'm at right now. It's more a reflection on my growth. So the Love Doors record is the one that's, you know, nearest and dearest to my heart right now, regarding
Mm-hmm.
convictions, regarding growth and kind of where I'd like to go. Um, but as far as the one that I feel like I was given liberty to just be myself, and I had a team behind me who was willing to say, "Yeah, let's go." It was Everyday Man.
Okay.
So the 2009 record. The reason being, I had just come out of a tough situation with the label I was with previous. Um,
Mm.
the first contract I signed, they and again, this is also on me for not seeing what was happening and also maybe perhaps not being confident enough to in my own abilities to push back. But there was a time where the narrative was like, you need to make records for these youth groups. That's the only way this is going to work. And I tried to somehow fuse what I was already doing with what they were looking for me to do, and the formula didn't entirely work, right? So I kind of left that situation feeling like this wasn't my best effort, and it wasn't what I listened to too many people. When there's too many cooks in the kitchen, it's you kind of you lose yourself a little bit. So I
Yeah.
ended up leaving that situation, and then when I signed with Chosen, which is a label in Philadelphia, they ended up getting a distribution deal with Universal, and Darren, who ran that label, he was like, "We're going to keep your budget as low as we can, as far as because that was probably one of the problems with the government name record is the recoupment statement was out of control. Like the amount of
Mm.
money that they spent or said they spent on that record wasn't. I couldn't make it back. It was wild. Um, and that was part of the frustration. I'm like, hey, my hands are tied behind my back here, but with Everyday Man, they're like, we're going to keep it under this number and we're going to let you do exactly what you want to do. By the way, calling your guys, calling your favorites, right? So DJ Shock from Rough Riders ended up producing most of that record because he and I had become good friends, and he just, again, and this dude, I mean, he did records for DMX, Pun, Eve, Puff,
Yeah.
Snoop. Like he's like 5 times platinum producer. It's insane, and just got his payday finally because he just won a lawsuit against Rough Riders and got his money because they were paying him. He just got his bag, which is amazing. But I remember when
Yeah.
that conversation started almost 20 years ago, where he was like, "Bro, what the heck?" Um, but he just believed in me, right? It's Yonkers dude, so he produced most of that record on the strength. And when there were times where that record did make money, like CBS, CBS ended up licensing some songs for the NCAA tournament. Made sure he got his due with that stuff. We always kind of
Hmm.
looked out for each other, but his production was so raw, it just hit me. I was like, this is what I always wanted to do. Was what this guy's bringing to the table, and then Darren and then brought this live instrumentation with their band, and it was just organic. And I felt like, and even though I feel like I'm a better lyricist now, even than I was then, even though I'm not practicing as much now, the content I felt was the most honest content I'd done. Because Darren said, "You're going to do you. I believe in you. Let's go." Uh, no pressure. Like there wasn't any pressure. He was like, "Just be yourself." And
Yeah.
it ended up, it was a lot of freedom in that. You know what I mean? So
That's
um,
what's up, man. That is what's up.
yeah,
Oh my
I love
goodness,
that.
ladies and gentlemen, if you just now tuned in, we got the one and only Mr. Bobby Bishop, Lynn representative to the fullest. Here to just, we're just being transparent. We're like two old guys just kicking it on the front steps like we used to do back then.
Oh, I am old. I am
How
am
old
old. It's
are you,
very.
don't mind me asking?
I
How
turned
old?
46. 46.
Wow. And I just turned
I know
48.
you're just slightly ahead of me. I know you're slightly ahead
Yeah,
of me, barely
yeah.
though. I'm right
Um,
there. I'm right there.
Something that we haven't talked about yet, all away from the industry and everything, is your support circle that you had coming up. Of course, the kids, everyone at the church on Washington Street was there. But and I already know you know where I'm going with this. I say this often: for every good man, there is a good woman
Of course.
right by your side, and you were blessed to have. I mean, and I've seen many good sisters really stand by the person that they truly believe in, but at the top of that list has to be Jess. Um, so shout out to Jess first and foremost. How you doing, my sister? All is well with you. Um,
She was
what was
amazing.
her thoughts in the beginning when you said to her, "Listen, this is obviously you all weren't married at the time. Listen, I'm going to be a Christian MC." What were her thoughts when you first told her that?
I don't know if it was necessarily like a sit down conversation because when we met, I was already doing it, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but it was just demos, So it was infancy idea. We were in college, right? She just got into college, right? So it wasn't necessarily like this formulated conversation, like, "Hey, this is what I want to do." But she definitely always held me down. Was always supportive. She isn't even really like a big rap fan, never was, but believed in believed in me, right? So when it came down to suddenly there were bigger opportunities, even when the opportunities weren't there yet, but the road to the opportunities. So really like the first big thing that kind of when we saw like, oh, I think something's happening here was when we did Amy's song, which was based on Washington Street Kids, right? Um,
Yeah.
a DJ in New York put it on the mixtape, and that's when all of a sudden all the New York stuff started opening up because all of a sudden it was all over New York. And
Mm-hmm.
because it was CDs, it wasn't going on to listen to this. It was they just started passing these things out, and that's when we started getting some attention for it. But that's when it was like, oh wait, something's happening here. And the first things that she did to help support that were because she's from out there. So when we were taking those trips to New York, we were staying at her house. Um, and her parents opened the doors, like, okay, bring your crew, stay here, go into the city, do what you're doing, and you have a place to stay. Um, so it started just, it was always just action. That she's a person of action, and it was always action with her. So, but the most patient years were when I was on the road, because
Mm-hmm.
the money is, people draw conclusions when they see a big, they see a name on something, and the presumption is, oh wow, you must have a full bank account right now because it says Sony BMG on it, right? And that just wasn't true, right? I had to like really grind to get a
Yeah.
full calendar, and the majority of the shows I was getting were independently. I was hustling, um,
Mm-hmm.
but because of that, it required me being gone. So 2005, I wasn't home the whole year. I was gone. Uh,
Wow.
Home on weekends, and then I was gone. I think it was 250 days, 260 days that year. I wasn't home, and she was patient. She saw what was going on, and she just supported me. And really, there were times where, looking back, I'm like, how on earth did you put up with that? Because some months the money was amazing, like wow, and other months it was like, oh no. what's
Mhm.
going on with the money this
Yeah.
month? Because that's how it goes, right?
Mhm.
Especially when you're waiting for royalty checks to come in, and you're like, hey, where's the royalty check? Um, you don't know when it's coming. So it's mostly most of the funding was based on concerts. So
Yeah.
if there was a full calendar, that was great. But on weeks that it wasn't so full, or it was ones that you were doing on the strike. But she was patient throughout, always held me down. Um,
Yeah.
that's why ultimately I had to reciprocate that. And when it came time for me to not be traveling on that level, you got to meet your partner in the middle, right? And but
Yeah.
never once, and I'm not exaggerating, never once did she discourage me. She always held me down, which is, like I said, is that's just the kind of person she is.
Amen to that. I know you can relate to what I'm about to say next. When I met the first time I met Akela, because we did the long distance thing for about a year and some change. But the first time I seen her, I knew then that I wanted to be with her for the rest of my life. When did you know that Jess was the one?
Congrats, that's amazing. Yeah, I sweated her from the second I met her. I'm not even exaggerating. Like, we joke about it because I was with my friend Demetrius. He was up visiting at college, and I remember going to knock on the door. We went over to her dorm just to say hi to some people. Knocked on the door, and when the door opened, Jess answered the door. I had met her. I had seen her around, but I hadn't met her. And she opened the door, and
Hmm.
for whatever reason I was there at that time, I forgot. I was like, who on earth is this? Right. So you know, and I did, and we joke about it because I did. I was a simp. Like I started sweating her hard for it. It was a couple of months where I was just making sure I showed up wherever she was going to be or hoping she'd be. I showed up. Um, yeah, that was 25 years ago. So
Wow.
a couple of months later we started dating, and then a couple of years after that we got married. So
Nice, nice.
yeah,
Like,
man. But I knew
and
early. Like I was sprung from day one. I really was. So she needed some convincing, but I was right there. So
I have to laugh at this kind of because I think it was kind of funny. It's like, man, when we did performances and Jess was there, because there was a lot of times Jess did come to them. I would look at you and I'm like, I know he must be nervous right now with Jess right there,
yeah,
and oh man, I because when Akela comes out with me when I'm DJing in certain places, I get nervous. I'm like, okay, when are you going to leave so I don't have to be nervous no more? Like, go somewhere. But she's just so loving what she sees and everything. And it's like, you know what? I have to be comfortable around her. And there's an ease of comfortableness when I'm around her in my element. And I'm sure
yeah,
you can attest to the same thing.
yeah. There's certainly a calming effect. Like I hadn't been on stage in a long time, and then this past September, we did an event, and I knew it was going to be big because we promoted it well, and it did end up being big. It's like I think like 300 people came out. But so it was international show came up, Sam White came up, and I was nervous because I hadn't done it. I hadn't been on a stage like performed. It had been years. Uh, but it is true. Like she does have a calming effect on me. Like but
Yeah.
for that show, she wasn't. She couldn't be. She runs the kids program. So she was upstairs. So but just the fact that she was in the building, like there's something about it that
Mhm.
as soon as you hit the stage, it's just like, hey, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. Do what you
Yeah.
do. Yeah,
Shout
of
out to
course. She's the best.
International Show, by the way. That's another guy that just, man,
He's a beast.
ordained like crazy just to do
Beast.
beautiful things for the kingdom. So much, much love to International
Yeah.
Show. So you have put out over just about maybe 8 albums or so, appeared on a whole bunch of other projects with people from Beat March out to Todd Collins, DJ Madge, so many others. You've done so many records with the likes of KJ and Sev, Pigeon John, and all these great, great legends that I feel should get their just due. What's next for Bobby Bishop musically? Are you doing
I don't know.
anything
Ask
now?
ask Apple Jacks. Ask artist. No, I the reality is this, man. I'm a full time school administrator,
Hmm.
therapist, and like I said, doing adjunct as a college professor. I don't have aspirations to kind of like reinvent myself as an artist. What ends up happening is periodically I get the itch or I get
Hold on
convicted
one
on a
second. Bob.
topic.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on. I got 18 seconds. So what I'm going to
Yep.
do is I'm going to stop this and we're going to come right back and finish up.
Yeah.
Okay?
That's what's
All
up.
right. I'll be right back.